Best post of the day, folks, by somebody called Sunday Girl, GURL. Breaking. Strait of Hormuz now observing New York Stock Exchange hours. Lunch break sponsored by Goldman Sachs. Indeed. Indeed. This morning we were talking about how the crazy postings and pronouncements of Donald Trump have really caused confusion and vitiated the environment, and how the hardliners in Iran have gone after the foreign minister of Iran. Now, it's hard to tell what was the compulsion for him to post what he did about the Strait of Hormuz being completely open, but the hardliners are saying that it was an incomplete post that he made, and that it should have been an official announcement and not a post made by the foreign minister. So the Guardian has weighed in about it all now, and the title of their article is Trump and Tehran's series of mismanaged posts stall progress toward peace. US President's desperation for war to end has seen him trying to speed through process he does not fully control. So it seems that all this effort to try to show progress being made and victory on either side, and Trump beating his chest and trying to show that Iran had completely surrendered, all of that seems to have spectacularly backfired on everyone. And now Mr. Araghchi's post about in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the Strait of Hormuz is completely open. Well, that knocked the price of oil down by $12. And so there's a lot of jokes and there's a lot of criticism in how that was done, the timing of that, and the result of that. So hence the tweet by this person about Strait of Hormuz issue is only open during market hours and lunch break is sponsored by Goldman Sachs. So yes, unfortunately, the negotiator and foreign minister of Iran is being criticized by the IRGC, who is very much on the hardline side. And again, they really feel that the Strait of Hormuz is a bigger deterrent now and in the future than any effort to have nuclear weapons. And this is really, as Ali Weiss had called it, the weapon of mass disruption that they have in their hands. So, we have it. And like I said, The Guardian has done a whole long piece about what has happened in the last 24 hours between Trump's post and then Araghchi's post, and then Ghalibaf hitting out at Trump saying that Trump has, everything he has said is a lie, and how 7 things that Trump has said and all have been a lie. So very unclear where things stand. There was all this optimism that the second round of talks were going to happen on Monday. They could still well happen, but the issue is the US naval blockade on Iran. Apparently, Trump has convened a meeting in the Situation Room and to discuss, again, the developments. Iran made some aggressive moves on 1 or 2 oil tankers today and turned back several ships, so they are enforcing their blockade. So there's all sorts of rumors that the US is now planning to escalate, and that they're planning to interdict Iranian tankers and board them. Naval blockade is already an act of war. Now, boarding Iranian ships is really going a step higher on the escalation ladder. Netanyahu must be jumping for joy if these stories are correct, that actually, and apparently this is coming from the Wall Street Journal, that actually Trump is planning an escalatory move and that they are going to interdict Iranian tankers. I would not be surprised, because Trump is a bully, and he thinks that his base wants him to be an even worse bully. So backing down is not what he's going to do. Unless something dramatic happens, I think we may actually see escalation this weekend. And that would be utterly, utterly horrible. So what else are we seeing? This Kaja Kallas of the European Union and von der Leyen, I think, can really teach us the art of hypocrisy. Kaja Kallas has convened some online meeting. Now, I'm not so sure if that was part of, Keir Starmer's online meeting along with Macron about creating some form of a militarized situation to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Not exactly sure. And why do I say that they're the mistresses of hypocrisy? Because Kaja Kallas has suddenly discovered international law. And she's talking about international law as it applies to Iran violating international law. Ms. Kallas had nothing to say over 3 years of genocide in Gaza, where every international law was violated, where humanitarian law was violated, where the laws of war was violated, where people were killed, tortured, raped, starved. She literally had nothing to say. And more recently, she has had nothing to say about the children killed in the attack on the Minab school, the children and individuals killed when the US hit the sports complex and the residential areas. Nothing to say when Israel hit heritage sites, residential areas. Nothing to say when the US hit a bridge and threatened civilizational erasure and threatened to attack the electricity grids and other civilian infrastructure that maintain life for 93 million Iranians. Yet she has a lot to say, and using the term international law for the Strait of Hormuz and how Iran is violating international law. And as expected, the Foreign Ministry of Iran has come out swinging about her hypocrisy. My jaw dropped when I saw her statement, and now they have weighed in to point out the hypocrisy, but we have been watching her in this hypocritical posture for 3 years. Nobody can forget the role she and von der Leyen have played and enabled and covered for the genocide. Meanwhile, those not covering for the genocide is the Haaretz newspaper in Israel that has really given us an insight into what has been happening. Their most recent article is entitled, quote, "I felt I was a monster," close quote. IDF soldiers talk about the, quote, "moral injury," close quote, and the silence. and I encourage everybody to read this. Somebody has summarized this, saying, "This is a must-read. Israeli soldiers with moral injury admit to unspeakable atrocities they committed in Gaza. They say it reminded them of the Holocaust. One says they put a Gazan civilian in a cage, stripped him down, a soldier peed on him while others laughed. Another emptied his machine gun into an elderly man with 3 children. When the commander came to the site, he spat on the bodies and called them sons of bitches." Another soldier says they encountered an unarmed Palestinian civilian who held his hands up. An Israeli soldier came near him, waited a few seconds, and just fired without asking questions, without the suspect doing anything, then reported the incident as a terrorist eliminated. Another describes how IDF soldiers would just take pleasure in destruction and stealing the belongings of murdered Palestinians. He said soldiers would steal electric appliances, gold necklaces, cash, everything, and called it a blessing to steal from Palestinians. None of those soldiers have ever been held accountable despite their public confessions to their crimes. The IDF refuses to even recognize moral injury as a mental disorder because it negates their propaganda slogan that Israel has the world's most moral army. Instead, the IDF quietly calls it identity injury to imply those soldiers are to blame for feeling bad about murdering Palestinians. So while Ms. Kaya Kallas hyperventilates about Iran violating international law by closing the Strait of Hormuz, she has nothing to say about this and genocide and crimes against humanity and all the crimes committed against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. She does not have the moral fiber of Omar Bartov, an Israeli historian who has served in the IDF and also describes what they were asked to do. She does not have the moral fiber of a group of IDF veterans called Breaking the Silence, who tell us what they did in the intifadas and how they broke the bones of Palestinians and how they grabbed and tortured and jailed and tortured Palestinian teenagers throwing stones. She does not have the moral fiber of these soldiers telling Haaretz what they've done in Gaza. But she has a lot of time to use the words international law for closing the Strait of Hormuz when it comes to profits, when it comes to economic damage. She has nothing to say about the massacre of elementary school children in Minab. The problem is that the world can see all this information side by side now, and they can call it out in real time. Hypocrisy is not flying anymore. There is absolutely zero moral clarity from most of Europe, except for Pedro Sanchez, who has convened a conclave of progressive leaders from around the world to challenge right-wing extremism, warmongering, and very much has called out what has happened in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iran. Something that Madams Kallas and van der Leyen are not able to do. But what they are able to do is teach us the heart of base hypocrisy.